Hey everyone, and welcome to Modern Day Debate. Filling in today for James is myself, and we are going to be debating on does God exist and the complexity of the cell. If this is your first time here, feel free to consider hitting that subscribe button. And we're trying to build a community here with people from all walks of life. Also, before we get started, I want to let everybody know that if you enjoy either of the speakers, you can find their links below in the description. As for the debate today, we will be having a format of 5-minute openings with 5-minute rebuttals, a 25-minute discussion followed by 25 minutes Q&A. So be sure to leave your questions in the side and I will get to them as I can. Also, super chats are an option. So if you have any and you feel like posting them, I will read them before the Q&A begins. And the debaters tonight will be Snake Was Right and PraiseIAm. And if you are unfamiliar with any of these people, I'm going to give them an opportunity right now to introduce themselves. So if you would like to start, Praise, feel free to introduce yourself and your channel.
Sure. Yeah. My channel's name is PraiseIAmThatIAm, and I'm an apologetic channel. I focus on trying to defend certain attacks on Christianity, and I try to also show examples of the Christian faith being true. So people can check that out. I also have hangouts every night so people can come in and join. So you're welcome to do that.
Awesome. All right, thanks. And the Snake.
Hey guys, Snake Was Right. My channel is mostly about atheism or evolution science lately, but I cover lots of topics kind of in the skeptic arena. And yeah.
Awesome.
Glad to do it today. We're covering for a couple people. I think there was some kind of confusion, so we'll do the best that we can. We're gonna try and cover a couple topics. Yeah, hopefully it's entertaining.
Yeah, this is last minute, everybody. Sorry about that. We were told about a debate going on, and they didn't receive the emails or they didn't reply, so here we are. So we're going to jump right into this. I'm going to start the timer. And who would like to go first, if anybody?
If it'd be all right if maybe Snake can go first this time.
Sure, Snake.
Sure.
Great.
So on the topic of does God exist, my position is actually basically I'm going to do the best job as I can to kind of run Tom Jump's position. He was supposed to be here tonight. And his position basically I really like because he says there is no reason to believe in God is basically his atheist position. I'm in the same boat. I have been looking for reasons to believe in God and evidence for God, and I simply have not found any. And that's my position. And simply having faith traditions and ancient world religions is not evidence to me of a God. And so hopefully we can go over some arguments. And as far as the topic of Praise wanted to talk about complexity of a cell and whether that qualifies as evidence for intelligent design or not. And even if it could be determined that life forms were created by design, I don't think that that necessarily is great evidence of God, because the creator could really be anything. It could be an alien species, and in which case you're really just kicking the can down the road, because then you have to discover what the creator. And even if the creator is a supernatural God and not an alien species, I think that same problem still applies. Who created it, or what process created it? I think that the infinite regress is kind of a problem for both sides, in the sense that we just simply don't know what happened in the early beginnings of the universe. Kind of the or purely physical, secular kind of way of thinking about it has to do with something that began expansion of the universe during the Big Bang, and what the universe looked like before that state is pretty much unknowable at this state in time. I personally have have a few theories about that, in the sense of I think about this a lot, and what kind of quiets my mind in the end is the thought that there are some logical limitations to everything. No matter what multiverse you're in or whatever, no matter what conceivable universe you're in, things still can't contradict. You still can't have a light bulb that's on and off at the same time. Although maybe some quantum physicists would disagree on that kind of logic, but I think that that's a very strong case. And so I believe that absolute nothingness, that is non-existence of anything and everything at any time, would be logically incoherent and impossible. So the question of like, why are we here at all, is simply, to me, is answerable by the fact that because it doesn't make any sense that nothing could exist, because something does exist. And so the ability for true nothingness, that is absolute nothingness, nothing anywhere at any time, that never existed at any point, because otherwise it could have never transformed into something if it was truly absolutely nothing. And so I think it follows from that point that nothingness is actually impossible for some reason, because if it happened, nothing else would have ever happened. So since something is happening, true nothingness is impossible.
1 minute.
And let's see, I guess I will touch on the complexity of the cell a little bit. Complexity does not equal design. And I think it will be very difficult for anyone to make a case for design if they can't conclusively give me some kind of criteria for how to decide which organisms or which genes were designed and which organisms and genes have been adapted or evolved. And so I think we should, I guess we'll start wherever seems logical after Praise's opening. And so I guess I'll concede the rest of my time on that.
That was perfect. 5 seconds left anyway. Right.
I want those seconds back.
Got it. All right, Praise. Whenever you're ready, I'll start the time when you begin.
So time, space, and matter is a continuum. They are contingent. I mean, the contingent argument is obviously a robust argument for theists. Whatever began time, space, and matter needed a cause. And obviously we have philosophical arguments, robust philosophical arguments to justify that as well. If you believe there is no intentional cause to the universe, then you are committing a simple naturalism of the gaps fallacy. Reason and logic point to everything beginning to exist having causation. The universe began, it needs a cause. To deny logic and reason, to deny this is denying logic and reason. Something the Bible says only a fool does to escape God's accountability. Quote, astronomers now find they have painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly in an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in the cosmos and on Earth. And they have found that all this happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone else would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. And this is Dr. Robert Jastrow, and he is a non-religious former NASA scientist, author, and futurist. And then we got metaphysics. I mean, gosh, just for example, the tag argument, the laws of logic. You got the law of non-contradiction. These are immaterial axioms. This is an immaterial axiom. Logical absolutes exist. Logical absolutes are conceptual. Concepts exist in the mind only. They are mental. Logical absolutes would exist even if your minds did not. They are not contingent on human minds, but it exists in the mind. Therefore, logical absolutes are transcendent. Since logical absolutes are transcendent, conceptual, they must exist in a transcendent mind. This transcendent mind is as we recognize it as God. Therefore, God exists. The laws of logic are direct inference to the logical nature of God because, one, they are tautological. Tautological. Tautologies transcend subjective epistemologies, such as the scientific method. They are axiomatic because they apply to everyone. They are immutable. They are abstracts, meaning they are non-physical. For example, you won't find the law of non-contradiction in a test tube or dissecting someone's brain. They apply everywhere at every time, at any place. And a quick analysis reflects God is the one responsible for the laws of logic. God is the tautology. He's spaceless, timeless, and non-physical, and that's exactly what we find in the laws of logic. And of course, we have scripture to back this up. John 1:1, John 14:6. God is immutable. Malachi 3:6, Hebrews 13:8. God is a non-physical conscious being, as written in John 4:24. And lastly, God is eternal, as written in Psalms 92, Hebrews 11:6, Exodus 3:14. So these laws are eternal. They will never change.
1 minute.
And there is no naturalistic explanation that can account for these. So we got science and then we got metaphysics. So it's clear that the evidence is swayed to the existence of God. And I'm going to go, I guess I go to more of the biology stuff, but I just want to get that out of the way. And for that, I will concede my time.
All right, then. That was only 30 seconds left anyway. So we're going to jump now into the rebuttal. And Snake, when you're ready to go, you're muted right now.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yep.
Always vigilant. Okay, so something that jumped at me was how Praise talked about how correct me if I'm have some of the wrong word choice, but the secular, scientific, or atheistic worldview, it's a way of escaping God's accountability. And that jumped out at me because I don't understand how I can be trying to avoid accountability to something that, like, I don't even believe in that exists. So, like, for example, if I'm trying to rob a bank or do something criminal, and let's just say I have some sort of delusion, and I think I just don't believe cops exist, that the police exist. I would have no reason to be worried about the repercussions or accountability to the police officers if I don't even believe that they exist. And it's kind of an absurd example, but that kind of behavior actually happens in the minds of insane people because they don't give credence to the things that they don't actually believe in. So I'm trying to understand this. It's kind of like a common meme in kind of evangelical culture, it seems like, or at least just religious, because I notice it in him as well, of we're trying to escape accountability to God, but we don't even believe that it exists. So it seems like you kind of have to fall back on like a subconscious type argument at that point. And as for the cause of the universe, I think that the cause is what I went over in my opening, that it seems self-evident that true nothingness is actually impossible. So by logical extension, something must exist. And it would seem that the properties of anything are able to create more complex structures when more than one interacts with another. Especially when we have situations like the Big Bang that create a lot of chaos and disorder. Order in the universe doesn't actually create anything. If you have two temperatures that are the same, it doesn't really create movement. But if you have a difference in temperature, you can actually create an engine just based off the difference in energy. And just having separation and disorder is what creates the ability for things to overlap in these different arrangements. Let's see. The latter part that he talked about is kind of what I'm more interested in, though. He says logical absolutes only exist within a transcendent mind, and I'm just wondering how did you figure this? What logical steps did you take to think that logical absolutes are only possible if they're enforced by a mind, and not just a mind, but some transcendent mind? So that seems a little vague, first of all. I'd like to kind of define and clarify what you mean by that, and just wondering how you figured out that only that type of mind can do this, even though we don't actually have any concrete examples of transcendent minds, as far as I'm understanding what you mean by that. So it's kind of assuming God to prove God, it seems like. Let's see. You said you won't find the law of non-contradiction in a test tube or a brain. I think you mean like you'll never be able to isolate it, right? You'll never be able to like hold the law in a location because it's just ever present. So why would that necessarily constitute like some kind of mind, or especially a transcendent mind? Because like why is God responsible for these laws? Why does it have to be a conscious mind that makes logic? Because by the way that I figure it, that logic must already exist in order for any mind, no matter how powerful or transcendent.
30 seconds.
That logic must already exist in order for it to make sense to the mind. And that mind cannot make the law because that mind cannot break the law in the first place. A transcendent that supposedly is making these laws of logic, it still can't violate the law of non-contradiction no matter how it tries. It is ever present. It is more transcendent than even God himself. God cannot contradict himself. So I think that's a great place to start the conversation.
Perfect. Time's up. All right, Praise, you are up.
Sweet. So I'd like to address Snake's statement. The reason why would atheists try to stay away from God or not, or be accountable to God? Well, it's the same reason why a criminal would stay away from a police officer. Humans know they are flawed and they don't want to be accountable to a perfect, holy God. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, even we see this in criminals in society, that criminals hate police. So I think there's a good correlation as far as that goes. So I want to answer the objections that Snake was bringing up with the laws of logic. And I want to try to explain this simply as I can. Logic is the science of valid inference. Laws of logic are not descriptive as to the physical world, but they are prescriptive as to rationality. They prescribe the right way to think. They are of the mind and apply conceptually, immaterial, as it were, the true statements. For example, the law of non-contradiction is not just perceptively true, it is true. The law of physics don't impose themselves on our minds like this. The law of gravity doesn't tell us what to think, not how to think, or the right way to think, or how to come to true statements by inductive, deductive, or abductive reasoning, like via the scientific method. All conceptual laws reflect the mind of a lawgiver. We see this in society laws. They reflect the mind of those who created the law. The only reasonable explanation for this kind of mind necessary to ground the existence of transcendent, absolute, and conceptual laws like this is God through elimination of propositions, what we call in philosophy a disjunctive syllogism. It's true God upholds the world in a logical fashion, but the laws of logic as we know them are conceptual, existing only in our minds. If laws of logic are simply properties of our brain, how our brains work, then why would we need the law of logic to correct how our brains work? If laws of logic simply of how our brains work, then we shouldn't need them to correct how our brains work. We should just think logically all the time. All things being equal, of course, but negative, laws of logic actually prescribe us the right way to think and guiding our thought processes. Humans don't form laws of logic by observation. They are conceptual or by convention, like which side of the road to drive on. We instead confirm pre-existing logical truths which are absolute and universal as with our observations. Second, if laws of logic were descriptions of the physical universe, then we might expect different regions of the universe to have different laws of logic, since different regions of the universe are described differently. But the laws of logic apply everywhere. Third, we would have no way of knowing if the laws of logic apply in the future if they have in the past, since no one has experienced the universe's future. After all, in the universe is constantly changing. If the laws of logic were descriptions of such conditions, then they would change as well. If atheists believe they know the universe better than logicians, then that folly is on there. That is their burden of proof. We don't govern logic. Logic governs us. It tells us how to think and applies conceptually to true statements.
1 minute.
It prescribes rational thought. Logic transcends humans because, like I said, we didn't invent it. Logical truths exist whether there's a human mind to recognize them or formulate them in axioms or not. They are definitely of the mind. And so the only foundation for the universal immaterial prescriptive laws of logic is the unembodied mind of God. And there I will concede my time.
All right, then. We are going to take that extra minute and put it to Q&A or discussion, whatever you guys choose. And we will jump into the 25-minute discussion right now. So, Snake, I'll let you start on this one.
All right, so I would like to say that logic does govern us. It means that everything is going to think logically, but that the chemicals will behave according to logic, at least the law of non-contradiction. But I would say that logic governs God as well, because God cannot break logic. I would say perhaps a being like God would have the ability to discover logic, maybe in a perfect way because it has perfect reasoning, but that logic still exists outside of God. He didn't make that logic because he can't contradict himself. He can't exist and not exist.
Well, that's more of a it's kind of a distortion there. How theists would explain it is the laws of logic are a reflection of the logical nature of God. He didn't create them because that would make him contingent. So he can't be contingent on anything. So these are reflections of the logical nature of God.
Okay, so why does it have to be a mind then?
Because these exist in the mind. They are that's what it means. Conceptual means they are of the mind. And that's what God is. He's an immaterial mind.
But the tree falls no matter who's there to witness it, and same with logic. It doesn't need a mind to enforce it. It just nothing can contradict itself like in a material state. You can say one thing and then say another thing, and that's like a conceptual contradiction, but I can't actually be two things.
Yeah, I don't think it's your objection. I'm trying to understand what you're trying to say. That it would be unreasonable, it would be irrational for it not to be a mind, because I mean, it's for minds, for rationality requires a mind to be rational. So that's what the laws, I mean, logic, that's what it means, rational inference. And that's why a mind is necessary for the laws of logic.
Well, the process that we go through rationality is different than saying that something objectively is rational, right? Because we can be wrong, but the logic of something stands independent of what you think about it.
Well, they are absolute, though. They're not bound by time, space, or material. So that would be a reflection of an absolute being, which is God. So I'm trying to understand your objection here.
Well, it's just it makes sense if you're talking about God as like the laws of logic or the universe, but then as soon as you start to ascribe aspects of the mind to it, I don't understand what you mean, because logic, you just can't you can't contradict yourself if you're God, first of all, because supposedly his nature is perfect, so he cannot contradict himself even in concept. But a God cannot create a rock which he cannot lift. He can't do things that can limit himself. And so that logic already exists and it limits God in that way. And I think it's the same with morality. Like there are reasons he decided, or whatever the reflection of morality, there are reasons the way it is.
Yeah. Well, we know the laws of logic cannot be mindless, because that would be saying a rock could be logical. So they have to be of a mind. And even animals, we can't even say they are logical. Humans are the only entities we can ascribe logic to. So it's just deduction in logical, like syllogism. We can go through syllogism to eliminate what is not a valid proposition.
But doesn't a rock, it can't process logic, but it still behaves according to the logic of physics, right? And
Yeah.
chemistry.
But see, that's descriptive. I mean, that's a description. That is not prescriptive. So a rock can't prescribe. I mean, it can't appeal to the laws of logic, because it's inanimate. It's an inanimate object. So that's why these apply to humans, and that's why our minds are connected. I mean, a mind, how we appeal to another mind to receive, how to correct our illogical thinking.
So it seems like you can explain the whole universe without a God by just invoking just basically the law of non-contradiction, which would essentially necessarily mean that something would have to exist, and you don't need a conscious mind at all.
You do, because these laws are of the mind. They are conceptual. They are conceptual laws. And by convention, they are of the mind. I mean, that's what conception. If you look at the word conceptual in the dictionary, it means of the mind, existing in the mind.
But we didn't invent logic. It existed before any of our minds.
Exactly. And that's the point I'm making. It's not contingent on anything physical. It's not contingent on time. It's not contingent on space. So it transcends the universe already. And there's nothing physical you can ground those laws in. By default, I mean, there's nothing that a materialist can appeal to ground these absolute laws. And there's another thing too. How could if the universe is all material, if it was a materialistic cause, then how could it ground these laws? Because they're immaterial to begin with. So you would have to go into, philosophy to try to sidestep that, and atheists have not met that burden of proof. I mean, theists have the robust position here with the laws of logic. So,
well, I think it is material in the sense that an atom cannot just exist in two places at once. And to talk about, so I don't think God is necessary because God cannot break these laws of logic. He's still contingent upon them, no matter what. So they exist outside of any transcendent mind, no matter what.
No, it's a reflection of
it.
God. If he was contingent on them, he wouldn't be God in the first place. This
Well,
like
he'd certainly be a lot closer to God than us.
I'm sorry, what?
If there was a being that was, powerful and all wise and stuff, but it was contingent, I mean, I would still call that a God.
To me, that's a logical contradiction. If a God has to have aseity. He cannot be bound by anything. So, as far as especially the Christian faith, we don't subscribe to that viewpoint.
But I think that's kind of poisoning the well, because if you're going in with that presupposition just based on like the lore of the Bible, then you're going to end up with a lot of contradictions because God cannot perform logical contradictions. So
Well,
he's
not that he can't.
logic. He can't make something make sense that isn't logical.
It's not that he can't. It's that his logical nature won't permit him to. And these laws of logic are not contingent on anything either. So you can see the inference of the mind of God. They are a reflection of the mind of God.
So what is his nature based on? I know you're going to say it's not based on anything, but why is it the way it is?
Because he, by his nature, he's logical. He's a logical God. So he's not contradictory. And he also has a loving nature, and he has a just nature. He cannot be unjust, because he has a just nature. He's a holy nature. I mean, this is why the Bible is required, because if you didn't have the Bible as this resource to find out who and what, how his nature is, then you would just be in the dark and all this stuff. You wouldn't understand who God is and his nature.
I'm just wondering. So I think that the problem of evil is definitely a problem if you're going to invoke that as loving and just. But I want to stick to this topic that we're on, at least for now. And I think it's really analogous to the question of objective morality as well. And I personally believe in objective morality. I don't think that there's any case you can make for subjective morality or moral relativism, because it is self-contradictory. So if there was God, it would seem to follow that his objective morality has to be based on something. So it has to be logical. So God is contingent on the logic. I don't see why that has to diminish God.
Yeah, if God is bound, if he's not bound by, if he's bound by something, see, if he wasn't contingent on the laws of logic, that means he's bound by it. That means he cannot be the greatest conceivable being. And that's another argument for theists, is the ontological argument. He is the greatest conceivable being. And if he is bound by logic, then he's contingent. He's contingent. That makes him a bound being. Then therefore, that would undermine his divinity.
He's still greater than everything else at that point.
Not the laws of logic. So this is what I'm trying to say.
Well, as a being, as a mind, he would still be greater. But what I'm saying about logic or morality is God. If God was not contingent on it, he could make it whatever he wanted. His nature could be ever shifting, fluid, and contradictory.
But that's that's why the laws of logic are there, because it's valid. I mean, it's inference to what is contradictory and what isn't contradictory. So, just by the very own nature, God will not act contradictory to his logical nature.
Halfway through, guys. Halfway through.
Okay. So far, I mean, your argument is God exists because logic exists, right?
Well, because the laws of logic are absolute, they are timeless, they are spaceless, and they are non-physical, which is the description of God himself.
Yeah, so I'm just still not convinced that I'm not necessarily in any of that, because there are fundamental forces that create the laws of the universe, and God cannot violate them either way. So it's like an irrelevant addition to me.
I don't see how the laws of, the physical laws have anything to do with the laws of logic. They're not contingent on the physical laws of the universe. And we don't even know what grounds gravity. What physical law, or what anything physical can describe what gravity is? So can you give me a cup of gravity? What is gravity? Can you even describe that in a materialistic sense?
Well, just because it's unexplainable doesn't really mean that the only other option is God. That's just the argument from ignorance.
No, I know, but the point is, though, you can't come from a naturalistic, paradigm if you're going to try to interpret reality.
I mean, the way that it seems some of the theoretical physicists are looking at it, and the way I think it makes sense, is that there's some theoretical physics surrounding how a lot of the particles of the universe, or at least electrons, are kind of actually on the same spot in one of the dimensions or something. It's really complex. It has to do with quantum physics.
Yeah.
And so my thought is that gravity would make sense that if all of matter is actually kind of existing at one point in maybe like the higher dimensions or something, that any separation of that matter in the lower dimension will necessarily it will have an equal and opposite reaction. So, and that's why matter falls back toward itself in like the third dimension, because in the higher dimensions, it is actually all in the same point.
You're just describing immaterial constructs, though. These are not physical material constructs. Dimensions are actually mental. And that's why they're defined too. They are conscious dimensions. So
we can perceive them, but they exist outside of our perception regardless.
Exactly. Yeah, and these are immaterial and they are conscious, and this is why God exists, because these are inferences of his existence. I mean, we can go into this with intelligent design as well. We have the same inference in the cell as well.
I mean, it's just the behavior of chemicals and physics. So since the traits of God are defined by some sort of logic, it seems like it's equally like that logic could exist regardless of a God and just apply itself to matter.
Yeah, but you can't. That's what I'm saying. Through disjunction syllogism, we can eliminate propositions.
Does God have to constantly enforce it with magic, or else nothing would adhere to this logic? Because that doesn't make any sense.
No, these are reflections. They're axiomatic. They come to a person, and the person they're self-recognizable.
But if you could, so assuming God created everything, you could just remove a piece of that universe and seal it somewhere else where there was no God. Would it continue to behave the same way? Does it somehow need like direction from God?
You need to have the preconditions for intelligibility. This is another argument for the existence of God, because what precondition would justify the laws of logic material in a naturalistic material fashion?
Well, since absolute nothingness would just produce absolute nothingness, that would show that that's illogical, no matter whether there was a God or not. Because there isn't absolute nothingness, because there's something.
Nothing does not have logical properties. God has logical properties. There's nothing in nature itself, in molecules, in chemicals, in biological processes, natural processes, that has logical properties. So you need to have something that you can substantiate that has logical properties. And there's nothing in physical processes you can do that.
I think we might be using the term logic differently a little bit. It's not like the chemicals are actually processing thoughts and arguments. It's just that they behave in ways that do not violate laws that we would call logical.
If that was true, they wouldn't be prescriptive, though. Even if you say they are descriptive of something that is prescriptive. And these are abstract entities. And this is what I'm saying. You can't, can you find me a specimen of the law of non-contradiction? No, because it's immaterial. It's a concept. It exists in the mind. And it transcends reality itself. We're living in,
Well,
go ahead.
it exists outside of the mind, because you can't nothing can violate the law of non-contradiction.
No, but our rational thought can appeal to these laws of logic. We're not bound by them. I mean, if we were bound by them, then we could never access them. So I mean, they're accessible. So that means that we have the ability to recognize them. I mean, that's another argument too, because minds recognize minds. I mean, something of the mind can recognize something of the mind.
6 minutes, guys, if you wanted to get on cell complexity. If not, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to my other major point, is if you can recognize the difference between design and natural occurrence, or recognize something, can you tell me any species or any gene that was an original species that was not adapted or mutated?
Well, we have the coelacanth, and it's over hundreds of millions of years. It is still, and it was stasis, you can call it that. Yeah, I would say the coelacanth, or living fossils. I could, give you that. That'd be a good answer for that.
But can you, if the coelacanth was an original fish kind created by God, or was it kind of an offshoot from other fish?
It would be of a kind. And a fish is a fish. I mean, if you're going to say different species of a fish, I mean, that's where it gets really controversial.
Yeah. So how do you tell the difference between the original created fish kind and its ancestor that have been microevolved?
Well, I mean, the Hebrew in the Genesis says they are types. So whenever you see types of fish, I think, I mean, would that make it easier? We know that a giraffe and a fish are completely two different types or kinds of animals.
It's just that if you're going to say that you can tell design, you should be able to tell which animals were originally designed and which animals have accumulated undesigned adaptations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm thinking we probably have to go to the cells, but I'm trying to understand your objection here, because you're saying that God should you put a trademark or something on a particular animal for us to recognize it, so therefore that design is not true. I mean, I'm trying to understand your objection.
Well, if you can tell design natural occurrence, you should be able to isolate which of the adaptations and which DNA segments are adapted and mutated, and which ones were 100% designed?
Yeah, so we're going to DNA now. I mean, we're going inside now to the molecule, but I thought you're trying to make a physical exterior argument. I mean, so now you're going into the DNA, right?
Well, it could be a species or a gene, just as long as you can. If you have some sort of process to tell which gene or which species was 100% designed and has no adaptive features, or which parts of the genome have not been altered since design, and which part have been mutated since the original creation.
Yeah, and I'm thinking this is the limits of change that we see in nature. I mean, you don't see genotypes change in nature. The genotypes stay the same. It's only the phenotypes that change.
Well,
And,
if the phenotype changes, the genotype has changed.
but you're not going to get a whole new genotype, though. You can change the genotype within the same genotype, but you're not going to see a genotype evolve into another completely new genotype. We don't see that in nature at all. It's always phenotypic level or just static level changes. There's nothing that's accumulating and going upwards. It's going downwards.
So what would prevent some mammal from accumulating the changes of its nostril up a little bit on its head, it losing its hair, getting webbed feet on its front legs, getting smaller hind legs, and getting a larger tail? Those are all microevolutions. And yet, if you put them together, they create a completely different phenotype and a completely different genotype.
No, the
And
genome.
that's whale evolution.
Yeah, we've never seen. If we go through the taxonomic system, we never seen a whole new taxonomy or taxonomies to evolve. They always stay in the same taxonomy. There's nothing that's changing.
But do you agree that position of the nostrils can change?
Are you talking about the whale with the dog of the whale? I don't.
On any animal.
Um, no, I'm saying they can change colors. They can maybe make a stronger nose or more hairy nose. I never seen evidence of a nostril changing, positions or anything. No.
Well, if I was born with my nose slightly like this, possible? Just slightly higher on my face?
Yeah, I guess that would be possible, but it's still within the
So
same genotype.
where does it stop? Because the genes don't actually care. The genes can grow whatever. In fact, we actually see in dolphin embryos, the nostrils start off in the front of the face and then they move to the back of the head.
1 minute.
We already know that biochemistry allows for these changes. We know that microevolution, we can do things like get webbed feet, lose hair. Why can't these stack up?
Because there'd be an extrapolation fallacy. You just can't extrapolate because we see changes, adaptational changes over a few years, and just extrapolate it to billions and billions of years. To me, that's an extrapolation fallacy.
Well, we see stages of this in the fossil record, so we know between each stage, we've observed changes like that in real time. But then we have the example of each stage.
So
we know something can get a fatter tail.
A whale?
What?
You've seen a dog-like animal evolve into a whale in real time.
We've seen animals, the size and location of their body parts. We've seen animals lose hair. We've seen them get larger and smaller body parts.
Of course, that's part of natural selection, and it's
the only changes seen in the fossil record, though.
Wrap it up, guys. We got 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would just say that these are just natural selection. Even that's part of the creation model. So that's nothing new in science of things changing and through natural selection, or genes varying. So I mean, of course, that's nothing new.
All right. Well, since you can't tell which of these changes have accumulated, which features were original and not adapted, it doesn't seem like you have any way of telling if something is actually designed or not.
Living fossils, of course we do, because they live for. I'm actually an old Earth creationist, so I could say over hundreds of millions of years, nothing has changed. As far as so there's minor evolution, and there's the I forget the exact verbiage of it. There's the minor one, and there's the big one. So
Macro.
macro, yeah, that's it.
But in those same layers, we see populations changing alongside, while the coelacanth changes very little.
Are you talking about geology, or are you talking about something inside the coelacanth?
Geology, we see other.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you.
populations in the same layers.
Yeah,
Okay.
but with the coelacanth, the seal is still the coelacanth. I mean, it's nothing that's dramatically shifted from that.
But was a coelacanth wasn't one of the originally designed fish types?
It's
Or did it adapt from a different kind of fish?
I would have to really look into the fossil record. As far as I know, that it's the coelacanth has been original kind. Yeah, so
Okay, so it's been probably the entire fossil record.
yeah, it's stayed the same through its 100 millions of years of existence.
But there have been many fish for the coelacanth which seemed to gradually change into coelacanth and diversify into other forms as well.
So can you show me evidence of an ancestor of coelacanth that is not a fish?
No, because they evolved from fish. But I could show you an ancestor of fish that is not a fish.
See, but to me, that's an extrapolation fallacy. It's conjecture. There's nothing, if you can't show me something non-fish, then, I mean, I could say the same thing with the creation model too, that something fish came from another fish. So there's nothing that you have that is, robust or strong for the evolutionary worldview.
Well, it's about the order. I mean, getting down into the fossils at that level, we can see that there are worm-like creatures with fins on them, and then we see worm-like creatures that have kind of like a broader fish-like tail with a few less fins on them, like more towards the front. They to have worm-like like snail-like eyes, and they start to move in and become bigger like a fish. And then we get into the bony fishes, and they look like, they don't have a jaw, they don't have bones. They look like worms with a little fish tail. And we see this gradual change. And so since we know that in real time, we can see changes, small changes like this to actual living organisms, and then we see these gradual changes in the fossil record in a dated order, it's not really an extrapolate. It's not a unreasonable extrapolation. And when using this model, we're able to predict where and when to find these fossils.
Yeah, and these just sound like phenotypic changes to me. Show me something of a fish going into a bear or a bird or something like that, and that would give you more credence to your position. But if you're going to say,
what I've been trying to get people to understand lately is evolution always pre-existing material and just changes it slightly. So every feature that a bear has pretty much is present in the arms and legs of mammals are basically just modified fins, and we can see that because there are transitional forms of only just straight up fish that use fins as legs, but fish that have more developed legs, and fish that look like salamanders, salamanders that look like fish, all kinds of transitional forms in between that show that fish are able to convert their fins into legs. And the whole bone skeleton form has been conserved throughout since the evolution, since they came out of the water, and they evolved into amphibians and lizards, and then eventually mammals. the skeletons have all been consistent, retaining mostly the same features from transition to transition.
Okay, so did you see this in real time, or is this through a fossil record that you're seeing this?
Well, we see changes like that in real time, so we know how it happened. We see the gaps in the fossil record, small gaps, and we see those small changes occurring in real time today. So we know how organisms and populations change and gain new features.
Yeah, well, my argument for that would be the rapid speciation to me actually supports the creationist worldview. I mean, the position rather than the evolutionary, because it's rapidly changing, and supposedly the evolutionary paradigm takes, billion or millions and millions of years for these changes to take effect. So to me, that contradicts your world or your position rather than the creationist one.
You guys, the debate was over a little while ago, but
Oh, okay.
okay.
Yeah, I noticed.
There's
What's going on?
we didn't have a lot of questions, so I let it go on longer. But if you guys want to wrap it up, go ahead for a couple minutes, and I'll give you guys a closing as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Praise.
So it's
Well, I enjoyed this discussion with Snake, and I respect his his politeness, and I respect that. So
yeah, it's always enjoyable. I think we should have a more focused debate on like cellular. We were just trying to
yeah,
cover a
yeah,
few bases today.
yeah. I had some arguments for CSI. I'd like to bring up to you and see how you would address that. Maybe I guess we can do another debate. I guess.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, I emailed James about it. But you can come over to my channel. Or you said you were having streams every day?
Yeah, every night on my channel. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can pop in anytime.
Sweet.
All right, guys are done. I guess we'll hop over to the Q&A. But first, I have to read off the super chats. So thanks for those. James will love that. We got about 4 of them in. So the first one came in from God's servant, who just made a statement. He just said, God is real, and his name is Jesus. Be baptized in his names, Acts 2:48. The disciple of Chios said to Praise, this is a question for you. Are all conceptualizations real? If not, what makes God more real than these other concepts?
Yeah, and this is what I was explaining in the debate. God is a mind, and all concepts are of the mind, so they are accessible to. We can access them because we are in the image of God, so we are a mind too. We have our own finite minds.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
Frank's 92 says snakes shades are awesome. So there you go.
America, yeah. Oh, am I allowed to say that?
Guys, too late now.
I screwed it all up.
There you go. There you go.
I'll edit it out later.
There you go. Disciple of Cryo said again, Praise, another question for you. Was the reason God couldn't drive away the valley-dwelling Canaanites in Judges 1:19 because he was a Bronze Age deity? Or that was it? Like, what would
you cut out there, man. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear the question. I heard half of it, but
Oh, sorry. For you, was the reason that God couldn't drive out the valley-dwelling Canaanites in Judges 1:19 because he was a Bronze Age god or deity? Or question mark?
yeah, we have to look into the context of that. As far as I think I've researched into this with scholar commentary, is that he allowed it to happen. Doesn't mean he was powerless or he was, or he didn't have the capability of doing that. So I think it just takes. To check out the commentary. Just don't like cherry pick verses off of atheist sites to support your viewpoint.
Got it. Got it. Sorry about that. I was on mute.
Oh yeah.
All right. And another super chat for you, from the same guy. Praise for you again. Praise. In Genesis 1:26 through 27, man and woman were created at the same time. But in Genesis 2:7, man was created first, with woman later. Why is this?
In my channel, I show that there's two different creations.
What?
And
World.
what do
Keep going.
you guys hear?
Slow-mo, drunk. I don't know how to describe it. Snake.
You sound like this. Like the opposite of helium, if you just took helium.
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea.
Like that.
Yeah, like I showed in my channel, I don't have the young Earth perspective on this. And I show that in Genesis 1:26, people have to understand what Hebrew grammar is. There's what they call particle and article. What they do is super emphasize subjects and objects and nouns, and there is none there in Genesis 1:26. So it's plural, mankind. So this is when, you know, the general human race was created. But in Genesis 2:7, the article and particle is there in the Hebrew, eth ha-adam. And that is a specific, and it's emphatic of a particular human being. It's a singular. So this is a specific man that was created in the Garden of Eden. So there is pre-Adamics already on Earth. You can check this out in my channel.
All right. Okay, awesome. All right, we're gonna jump into the Q&A now. Those were super chats. So
Oh, sweet.
Let's see, who is this one for? They didn't say who this one was for. It says, how simple would a cell? Oh, okay, I can get it now. Praise, this is one's coming to you. How simple would a cell have to be to not be considered designed? Or are all cells evidence of design? What about cells without major organelles, for example?
A cell that's reducible, I would concede is natural, but we see the information inside the cell is not only irreducible, it is specified and complex. So that right there is inference of a designer. Like I'd love to debate Snake on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of odd to pick out specific things for evidence of design, because like you think everything is designed just by nature of it adhering to natural laws, right?
No, I don't say like sand, for instance. And this is I was going to probably explain my debate. There's ways like Shannon's information. That's how we can determine whether something is specific or not specific, or natural laws, or natural order or disorder. So no, I don't hold hold to that position.
Okay.
All right. Next one then is for Snake was right. From K2. Is a giraffe a horse with a long neck?
I'm not sure on the exact fossils, but essentially, if you could get a horse to have a long neck, would you consider that to no longer be a horse anymore? That's, to me, that's the more substantial question. I think they're more related to horses than us, obviously, but I'm not sure exactly. They're not just a horse that has a long neck, to be technical, because horses and giraffes would have had a common ancestor, if anything, and would split between horses and giraffes. But I don't think there's any limit that would limit, say, a horse-like animal from gaining a really long neck. And I don't think there's anything in genetics which would prevent that kind of plasticity either.
All right. Got it. So the next one then, coming at you for praise. Causation is temporal. It's a change of states. If a god has if a god has a choice, he must change from the undecided to the decided, also requiring time. Does God not have a choice, or is he bound by time?
No, God is not bound by time. God is timeless. And I could even say that time is an illusion. Or yeah, the way I would say it, the way I would explain it, time is in the essential nature of God. So he's not necessarily outside of time. That you can say he is time. Like it's part of the nature of God.
Okay, got it. Awesome. Take a breath. Take a breath. All right, Snake, you're up on this one. If fish evolved into amphibians, why would it cause the addition, then reduction, then addition of lots of roofing bones and snout bones on the way to becoming an amphibian?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what they evolved into amphibians.
Yeah, basically it was if fish evolved into amphibians, why would it cause the addition and then the reduction and then the addition of lots of roofing bones and snout bones on the way to becoming amphibian?
Roofing bones? What?
That's how it was written. Or it could be spelled, how spelled correct is.
Well, the series may not be directly related in a linear fashion, but evolution does not state that everything is just in a constant state of gain. Evolution is not constantly trying to make the biggest, toughest, most strongest, most powerful creature that it possibly can. Just plastic to the environment. So if 1 month it's more advantageous to have snout bones, longer snout bone, it said, then those babies born with the variant of a longer snout are going to be selected for positively. And then if it turns back to it's somehow more advantageous to not do it, then it's going to swing the other direction, and that happens all the time. The environment is in complex, and we're constantly adapting to it. So what was it? Snout bones and
Yeah, snout and roofing bones.
I'm afraid I don't really have a specific behavior that that I'm not quite sure what he's asking, but basically there's no reason in evolution that each type of change has to be linear. It responds to the environment.
The skull or roofing bones are of the skull. They're a set of bones that cover the brain, eyes, and nostrils of a bony fish.
Okay. Yeah, it's just some conditions were advantageous, and then maybe the environment went back to how it used to be, and so the selection pressure went back to how it used to be, and then it changed again. That happens.
Got it. Okay. Praise, you were up next. By what criteria can we evaluate whether something is designed? Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, referring to specific measurement tools, please.
Information is the medium between supernatural and natural. So it would be the information itself. Information is immaterial. It's code that comes from a mind. I think the film Free did a great job explaining that in last night's debate. And if you check his channel out too, he has some good stuff on information. So I think it would be, another thing is information runs the show in the cell. So I would say information.
All right.
I'd really like to have a discussion on exactly what you guys mean by information.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next one for Snake. Do you hold the belief, I don't believe God exists, based on the conscious rational evaluation, or were you determined to hold this belief?
I mean, it was the same set of beliefs I was born with. I would at no point did I hold the positive belief in God? So I do not believe that God exists. I'll go as far as to say I hold the positive belief that none of the proposed gods really exist. I think there's a better case for like kind of a vague deity. But I think that there's enough evidence for claims such as the Abrahamic God, what it's claimed to be are contradictory enough so that I think there's a positive case that those gods do not exist. I'm a little more agnostic, I guess you could say, on the more vague question of God, but I do not hold. I do not believe in a God for the same reason I believe there are no leprechauns, because I've never seen any evidence for a leprechaun, and that's just how I'm going to treat everything until I see evidence for it. I don't believe in it, and that's as simple as it gets.
Got it. Okay. All right. The next one then is for praise. It's a long one. So what I did is I tried to go there. It's a lot of Bible verses, so I won't go through all of them. But Iron Chariot says praise in Genesis 6:6, Exodus 32:14, Numbers 14:20. The list goes on. It says God cannot change his mind. But in Numbers 23:19 through 20, JA 1:17, God does not change his mind. But later, God does change his mind. Can you explain this?
Here's the Gish galloping. I know Iron shared here, but he's cool. Though. I guess we just have to take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, these are anthropomorphisms. It's hard to say. Anthropomorphisms. And what these are intended to do is convey it's like a literary device to convey something that God is trying to come to our level of understanding. I mean, he's trying to give us a spiritual lesson on something. And so, yeah, just because something appears to be contradictory doesn't mean it.
Okay. Awesome. Snake, is there anything that would make you change your mind to becoming a Christian?
Yeah, if God appeared before me, then I mean that's a pretty nail in the coffin. I'm sure there are other instances in which I would be convinced, but I think it should be trivially easy for a God to figure out what would convince people and then give them that. I'm trying to think, it could be a lot of things, but basically my go-to is if God appeared before me, or if I was able to verifiably witness some kind of miracle. But I've heard reports of witnesses of miracles for every faith, and I've never witnessed any. I've never seen any suspension of the laws of physics. I've never been visited by any voices in the night, although that would be weak evidence. I would need something, probably a material appearance of like an angel or Jesus himself in a way that I could determine that it wasn't a hallucination. So maybe a someone else was in the room also at the same time and saw the same thing as me. Yeah, I don't think it would really take much, and I'm not really worried about it. In fact, that's my preference. I wish there was a God and there was an afterlife. I just don't see any evidence for it. So as soon as I'm presented with, I'm looking for it, but I haven't found any.
All right. Okay, we're moving on to praise. Another one. Wait a minute, we got a super chat just popped in. Snake, do archaeologists see intelligent design?
Do we see it or seek it?
See it. Do they when they're digging around? Do they recognize this as intelligent design, or do they just see random chance?
Do archaeologists see
Intelligent design. That was it. It was a one sentence.
In human remains, I can't tell what the insinuation might be.
Keep an eye out for him. His name is Sheep Work, so he'll elaborate because he'll hear us talking about him right now. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I'll come back to that one. So Praise. How do you account for the fact that there are other systems of logic which are functional that don't have the laws of logic that he is referring to?
Yeah, I've heard about this, and I just don't see anything that is justified about those other systems or laws of logic. That I might have to look more into that, but I just don't see how those schools of logic supersede the the logical absolutes known in like tag per se.
Okay. All right. He could probably elaborate as well. We only have one more question, actually, unless the Sheep Walks replies. I'll keep an eye out for him. He hasn't yet.
I could try to answer that too.
What's that?
I can try and answer it too if he doesn't clarify.
Sure. Yeah. Think about it real quick. I'll read it one more time to you. Then I'll ask Praise a question. Snake, do archaeologists see intelligent design? So, Praise, Genesis. It's your favorite guy here, Iron Chariot. For you today. Genesis 17:7. The covenant of circumcision is supposed to be everlasting, but in Galatians 6:15, it is no longer of consequence. Why?
Okay, I'm trying to understand the question. No longer of so what is it? I'm trying to put all this together. So can you say it again one more time?
Sure. In Genesis 17:7, verses 10 through 11 as well, I think. It says the covenant of circumcision is to be everlasting, but in Galatians 6:15, it is of no longer a consequence.
Yeah. Okay. This is talking about circumcision of the heart. That's because it no longer exists because it's spiritual now. It used to be physical. The first covenant is physical, and the new covenant is eternal and spiritual. I mean, this is classic covenants: old covenant, new covenant. Come on, Iron. Come on, man.
Okay. Block replied. He said, if archaeologists see intelligent design when they are making discoveries, then why don't you see intelligent design with what they discover?
Well, archaeologists are studying humans, and we know humans exist. We haven't determined whether God exists, and we haven't determined what the tools of a God are, and so I don't see much of a substantial analogy there. There isn't really a hard and fast to tell design, but we know humans make buildings, and we know humans make tools, and we know a lot of the designs of these tools, so we can recognize them easily. But my question is essentially, if you think you can tell between a design and a natural process, then you should be able to apply that to genetics and speciation. And I think I've demonstrated that, he can go look up terminology or whatever, but even they don't really know how to determine which genes or which species were the original creations and which ones have been mutated and adapted. And since you can do that, that's further confirmation that there is no real hard and fast way to just look at a thing and decide whether it was designed. The way biologists do it is they already have a lot of background information on what they're looking for and what they're looking at. It's just they're looking at primitive versions of what we already know that humans can create.
Right. Okay, we have another question then that just came in for Praise. It says, Alex Malpass pointed out multiple times that the law of non-contradiction might not be true, evidenced by things like the liar paradox and Hilbert's Hotel. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I've listened to Alex Malpass a few times. I do respect, what his viewpoints of logic is, but the nature of logic itself is immaterial. There's nothing. This is what I'm going to show. I mean, this is how I tell Alex that there's nothing physical about the laws. It doesn't matter. I mean, the logic itself doesn't matter if it's a discipline or one is a different discipline of logic, or whatever. So he needs to address that. And I don't think he's ever sufficiently addressed that. He's just arguing semantics about a particular method of logic. So he still hasn't escaped the paradox of his worldview.
All right. Well, that was all the questions, and we went over time. So I hope everybody liked it. That was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
I'm going to let you guys do another 2-minute closing for yourself. And if anybody's having an after show, mention it so everybody can join you. And I'll hand it over to Snake Was Right first.
All right, I'm thinking about an after show. So actually, maybe I'll join Praise if he's one, because he does the stream. All right, so closing statements. So I guess I'm just going to be kind of repeat a little bit here, but so like I just said a couple minutes ago, if you do have really a good way to distinguish from natural causes, then you should be able to turn that process, that methodology, scientifically towards life itself. And well, I haven't seen anyone claim that anyone on the creationist side claim that they've actually discovered the original set of genes, even though many of us share a lot of the same genes. Many species, even humans and worms, share a lot of the same genes. Humans and jellyfish, I think, share like 30% of their genes, or maybe even higher. Maybe that's just daffodils and humans. The point is, you should be able to determine the difference there if you have a robust model or methodology for telling design from natural processes. And as far as I can tell, that doesn't exist. I've been searching for like a hard and fast list, like what qualities does something need to qualify as design. Really, we can just tell based on similar objects. And I was having a conversation earlier today that kind of drilled this into my head, is we should really keep these analogies within biology. So we can find analogies of machines and tools. We know humans make machines and tools, and we can see it. We can see primitive versions. But I don't think that analogy can extend necessarily to biology or chemistry, since these tools are basically predate any understanding of biology or chemistry. And the other major point that I thought we covered tonight was really that what is logic, or at least natural law? What is it based in? I tend to think it's based on just the fact that certain states of being are necessarily contradictory and thus impossible. And these laws and rules can exist whether or not a mind is there to define them, whether or not it's a transcendent mind or a mind that understands what's going on. And all of these minds are contingent upon the operation of these natural laws. So I don't see why a mind is necessary in the equation of the origin of these natural laws. I understand the claims of theism much better in the sense of that it's a non-personal, non-conscious kind of deity, a deity which doesn't change its mind. It just represents or maybe manifests in the natural law of the universe. And I kind of think the same way about the stories of the Bible. It makes sense if it's kind of a parable of man against the world, or not necessarily against, but just living in the world, the natural consequences and state of existence, and God as a force of nature. Everything in the Bible seems to make sense from that point of view, although many other religions do as well, as a myth, as a story. But as soon as you start getting into, well, it was a mind, it was conscious, it's making decisions, that's when it starts to get into contradictions like, how can an all-good being allow to exist? Why do bad designs exist from this supposedly perfect designer? How can something be all-powerful and yet it cannot create rock which it cannot lift, which is necessarily a limitation to omnipotence. So, and I guess I'll end again on my analogy to morality. So if God is representing or manifesting the laws of physics, or just writing and deciding the laws of physics or morality, he's doing so for a reason. He's not just randomly just decide, well, these chemicals do this and it's wrong to murder for no reason. There are reasoned, there's reasoned rationale behind this, and it was that rationale stands regardless of the opinions of any mind, transcendental or not. That logic is irrefutable and it is objective, which means it stands irrespective of the God. If God was the source of morality and logic, it would be objective. It would not be objective. So I think that's the main source of kind of our misunderstanding there. I don't think I have too more to say, but hopefully we can expand on these discussions and delve more deeply in the future.
Yeah, maybe even in the after show.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Praise, you are up.
So tonight we heard the jargon, the same jargon from atheists, that they're not convinced God exists. Like they are the arbiters of evidence or proof of God. But you see, even these buzzwords like evidence, proof, they presuppose an objective metaphysic. And it goes into my laws of logic too. This is conceptual in nature and axiomatic epistemologically. And through these processes of elimination, virtue, syllogism, like I mentioned in the debate, atheists unwittingly negate themselves from grounding such axioms as evidence proof, because science only deals with approximations and probabilities. In order to measure probabilities and approximations empirically, there must be an objective standard in which results are weighed against. Since the materialist worldview cannot account for distinguishing objectively true propositions from false ones, therefore only the Christian worldview can. So even their own system of disbelief, it's glory to God already with that. I mean, that shows evidence for God right there. And Snake was mentioning, well, if Jesus showed up with angels and stuff, well, they did this in the New Testament, and people disbelieved, even after they saw the miracles of Christ. To me, that is circular and begging the question from the beginning through the lens of an atheist. See, to find evidence of God, you need to go outside yourself and get rid of this arbitrary thinking. I mean, that is the folly of atheism. So, I pray for Snake that, and other atheists too, that they put too much confidence in their own the way they perceive reality instead of going outside of themselves, and then they might be able to see and understand God because they're too consumed in themselves, in their own rationality, in their own lens of the world. So, and as far as intelligent design too, that design, that is, to me, a straw man argument, because you need to know the intentions of the designer to criticize the design. How do you know what the intentions are? So to me, that's a self-refuting argument. We do know complexity, though, because we have Shannon's information. So we can determine complexity. So yeah, and people can check my channel out. You can join in our channel. So I encourage people to do that and engage, because what I've noticed is when non-believers engage with believers, they start to change their beliefs a little bit. They start to maybe get a little bit influenced, and that's all. And that, to me, that's the whole point of Christianity, is to hopefully encourage non-believers to think differently, and that's what repentance is. So with that, I concede my time.
Okay, wow, I feel like I've done drugs and I haven't done any. We got a super chat that just got blasted in for $5 right now. So thanks for that, Sabrina. It was why do atheists acknowledge consciousness when the observed science field of neurology says that there is no such thing and everything is just in the mind? So I don't know if you guys want to answer that real quick or have that as part of your after show.
Yeah, at the
Well, I mean, I'll just say, Rick, I don't think any neuroscience says there's no such thing as consciousness. I think, well, we haven't exactly solved it and totally explained it, but and no, everything is not just in the mind. Things are objective and exist outside the mind. So.
Yeah, to me, the mind is consciousness is irreducible, and of course, that is another evidence of God. Because if consciousness was reducible to is physical, then it couldn't be irreducible. So, I mean, that's how I'd address that.
All right. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you everybody for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed this. I wanted to thank Snake was right for this because he basically saved the day. There was actually no debate going to happen because nobody came. We sent out the invites and we tried to get in touch with them. We got no response. So with no Praise and no Snake tonight, this was not going to happen. So kudos on them, and be sure to check out their channels. And again, watch for an after show. I'm sure they'll post a comment in the section below when this goes live or when this finishes being uploaded. And you can find their after show party there. And so again, I wanted to thank Praise and Snake.
Yeah.
And hope you guys come on soon. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you personally want to debate. Leave a message for James about it. And I hope you guys had a great weekend. And we are out.